Hello and welcome to Couples Date Night. This is Akwesi Opong. Thank you for joining us today. We are very excited for all the wonderful things that are going on in your home and in our community. I know in every day there's things that we can celebrate and things that are not so pleasant, but we want to do our best to count our blessings and to see the things that are going well and working well in our favor. And we're so glad that you've made some time to join us today. We have something very exciting to share with you today. So reach out to a few friends or share this podcast with somebody you know. This will also be playing on Sunlight Radio Online, and we will also archive this on our website, enjoylifewithyourspouse.com. So thank you, and we'll be right back. Thank you again for making time to join us today. We are very, very excited and really, really glad that you continue to come back to listen to the various lessons we have on relationship and marriage. And this is Enjoy Life with Your Spouse and coming to you on Sunlight Radio and also our podcast. And as I've mentioned time and over, our ministry we seek to provide resources to help couples enjoy their marriage together. And as you know, popular culture will tell us every negative spin that could be put on marriage has already been done. But we know the truth of the Word of God, which tells us that there's a scripture in Ecclesiastes 9:11 that says, "Enjoy life with your wife," and that is actually the basis of the for the name of our ministry, which is Enjoy Life with Your Spouse. So um, I often see it as the day you get married, you're given a check for maybe $1 million, and all the things you do to maintain the love, joy, and excitement in your marriage, you tend to keep. It ensures that you keep more of that money. The things that we do to take away the joy takes away from that pot of money as well. So our goal is to help you to find ways of keeping more of the joy you have. If everyone can think back on their wedding night or their wedding day, as the joy and the excitement that came to you that day, it was immeasurable. And where the question is that where are you today? And I believe that we've allowed so many things to set in over the years, and our goal is to help us grow out of those things and work on ourselves to ensure that we are taking steps to truly enjoying life with our spouses. Today we are going to talk about indifference in marriage. It's something that we don't hear people talk about quite often. When you hear people talk about indifference, it's probably referring to things in our everyday life, but not directly relating to marriage. But we're going to look at it from a marriage perspective. What is indifference, and what does it mean, and how can we tell if indifference is setting in? So the first thing that I like to do is let's define it. Indifference in marriage can be happen or usually happens as a result of various hurts, resentment, pain, anger, things that have happened in the past. So, and usually it's not just a single occurrence, hurts that happen in the past, resentments. Resentment is in a situation where something happens, it's not dealt with, and the pain and hurt of that remains over time. It becomes resentment, and the mere sight or the mere voice of the person seem to bring up very negative emotions. So when these emotions build up over time, one person in the relationship becomes indifferent, and in that state, it is easy not to care or feel anything when your spouse when your feelings and emotions are burned under a lot of hurt. So indifference is that state where you don't feel any emotion, you don't feel any love, and this is where a lot of people become very careless and they do things that generate more hurt and pain towards the other person. And as you know, the best way of dealing with pain is not to hurt the other person as well. So let's do our best to understand these things. And I've often said that when you realize you're hurt, something happened that really hurt you, this pain, make sure you deal with it extensively. Make sure you get to the bottom of it. If you're asking for forgiveness or you're being forgiven, if you don't feel that the issues have been dealt with, tell your spouse, can we talk more about this? And whoever is the offending spouse to should really apologize deeply, in the sense of not saying things like, if you want me to say sorry, I'm sorry. That is not an apology. That will still leave a lot of hurt and pain. But a deep apology will be, thank you very much for helping me to understand what I did. And if I heard correctly, what you're saying is that the words I used towards you the last time when we were out was very hurtful and painful, and and you were not happy about it. And I'm here to tell you I'm deeply sorry, and I'll never do that again. That is a more profound apology, and that is one of the things that we do earlier on in the game to ensure that resentment won't build up, hurt won't build up, which will later on lead to indifference. So let's address these issues as they come up, and it will help us over time ensure that these little foxes, as the Bible called them, the little foxes that destroy the vine, will not, the little fox of indifference will not take away the joy in our relationship. Some people even use indifference to get back to their partners, and hurting them. I think it's something that we already touched on. They seem not to care, because they feel that they've been hurt in one way or the other, you know. So the trouble with this is that they gradually, eventually become too good and not at not caring. And being good at not caring is not a good place to be. So what's the one thing that's getting fixed? That's getting fit, excelling at work, and building a lasting marriage have in common. None of them happen by accident. These things happen as a result of being unintentional or being intentional. Now, part of my resources today comes from Christianity.com. They have resources on various theologies and principles, and everyday resources to help us live the best Christian life that we can. And I want to make sure that I give the sources of some of my references, and some are from personal experiences as well. So I want to make sure that is clear. So no one unintentionally or accidentally start exercising. If you want to be fit, if you want to learn a new skill, it doesn't just happen. Waking up early, becoming better at our skill, or growing deeper in our marriage, it's also something that has to be done intentionally. We have to be mindful. We have to put effort and action to it. Every single one of the most valuable things in life all takes one thing to flourish, and that is intentionality. We have to be intentional. One of my good friends saying that he typically says we have to be purposeful. Being intentional or purposeful really helps us to arrive at better and greater results. Now, and when one person refuses to be intentional in growing deeper in his relationship with God, or in his relationship with a spouse, or in his career, that is when we start losing ground, and certain areas of our life starts to stagnate. Stagnation gets in, and you know what happens when water stays in a pot for a long time, and stagnation begins to stink. So the burden falls on us to ensure that we're taking all those steps um, to prevent stagnation, which can also result in uh, uh, issues that can come up in our day-to-day life that can bring about indifference. Being unintentional in your marriage often starts with indifference. And again, indifference, as we define it, is not caring. That can be fueled by guilt, unforgiveness, and over familiarity. That's also over familiarity. It's also another way of saying complacent. You become very complacent in your relationship. Things happen every day. You see the person every day, and most men typically fall into this category where they take their spouses for granted, their wives for granted. So we have to make sure that we are not creating any environment for indifference and over familiarity to grow. Indifference is one of the most unwanted list um, uh, of having killed so many marriages. It's one of the top issues, I guess, that have destroyed a lot of marriages. If we want to fight for our marriages, we must first of all make sure that we get rid of all kinds of indifference. We need to be intentional and start fighting against indifference. And there are a number of ways that we can go about this, and we're going to get into the details of some of the things that we can do to make sure that we are fighting indifference in our relationship. So, a few things that I want to say here, that if you are in a relationship where you feel indifference is beginning to set in, one of the things that you have to be careful is not to make plans to pay your spouse back for the exact thing they've done to you. That will not result in the best possible outcomes. It's probably going to deepen the situation and make it worse. So we have to make sure we are taking steps to make sure that we are dealing with indifference. If we've been hurt, we have to show our maturity by showing love. If we've been hurt, we have to show our maturity in making sure that we are taking steps to grow out of that. The Bible talks about pouring cold water on our on I don't want to use the word enemy, but in the context of the Bible, it said enemy to really illustrate the point that in a case of conflict between husband and wife, setting a good example, doing things out of love, doing things out of a pure heart, opening our heart is always a good place to start. So as we go through these things, I want us all to think about things that we can do to make sure that indifference will not set in our relationship, and we will be able to overcome all the traps of indifference and over familiarity, unforgiveness, pain, guilt, and all of that aims to erode all the joy and peace we have in our relationship. Again, my name is Akwesi Opong. This is Sunlight Radio Online, and we will be right back. Hello, and thanks for joining us again on Sunlight Radio Online. My name is Akwesi Opong, and today we are talking about indifference in marriage. Indifference in marriage, and we've already established that indifference begins with hurts and and pain as a result of things that have happened over time, and resentment that has crept into our relationships. And some of the things that we're going to do is um, we are going to look at some of the things that we do when resentment sets in or indifference sets in. So we are indifferent towards our spouse when we overlook the simple things they do for us every day. You know, and it could be a myriad of things that your spouse does for you every day. It could be preparing a meal. Just think about it. Your wife gets up early in the morning, or by the time you get home, a meal is ready to ensure that you're well fed. And if there's hurt in your heart, you know the husband who is hurt or the wife who is hurt could overlook acknowledging what his wife is doing. You know, like think of it. A woman who is hurt could also overlook the good things the husband does in upkeeping the home, mowing the lawn, making sure that the things that are broken around the house is fixed. Um, you know, these are the things that begin to show. It starts manifesting that something has happened in the relationship. Um, so another thing is helping with chores. When you begin to realize that your spouse is no longer helping with with chores around the house, then these are signs that begin to show that you know um, indifference is beginning to set in. But there are things that we can do to make sure that we are overcoming that, and I want us to put a better positive spin on it. So the things that we can do based on what we have said earlier is helping your spouse, around the house, making sure that you are not neglecting your duties as a husband or wife, holding and touching each other, holding hands. Um, you know, um, it's another thing that can be done as well. Helping with chores around the house. I said that. Speaking encouraging words, speaking their love language. I can't say that enough. Working to provide for your family, giving a kiss goodbye or a kiss welcome. Laughing at each other's jokes is another one. The jokes that typically that both of you will find something funny to laugh about. And also making sure that you are very playful with each other are things that we can begin to do to start growing out of it. You know, we are also indifferent towards our spouse when we fail to appreciate them. So appreciation is a key part here. If we appreciate our spouse, we'll be able to show or overcome any kind of indifference that is beginning to grow in our hearts. And what are some of the things that we can do to show appreciation? So some of the things we can do is appreciating their talents. Maybe your spouse, your wife sings at church, or your wife is a community leader and she does things in the community to help to ensure that not only your children but people in the community are doing well. And when she does what she does well, we have to appreciate that and let them know how grateful we are and how proud we are. A smile is a great thing. We have to appreciate a smile. We often talk about things that are not going well, but if our spouse does something that is really thoughtful or is touching, like a smile, we have to acknowledge that. We have to appreciate that as well. I already talked about abilities, commitment, our everyday life. There's so many things that we all do in our relationship to strengthen the bond. And earlier on, I talked about things like cooking or cleaning. or even working. The fact that you work and your spouse work doesn't mean that you cannot appreciate your spouse for the hard work, the many hours they put in to make sure that you have income coming in to support your home and your family. you know we have to make sure we appreciate the hard work of our spouses. The other thing also is our sense of humor. Let's not put down the wonderful sense of humor that your spouses have. It's another way of making sure that we are appreciating them and not showing indifference towards them. Now, one big area that I want to talk about too is desires and dreams. Why is this very important? If your spouse comes to you and say, I want to share with you a dream that I have, or a goal or an objective, something I plan on doing in the next 5 years. And let's say it's a big dream or a big goal. Let's say your spouse tells you, I'm going to open a shop that sells antique furniture. And you know very well that your spouse has no background in dealing in antique. And it's quite laughable, but we have to make sure we believe in our spouse. We are not putting them down. We are not discouraging them when they talk about their dreams and their goals. We are not making them feel inadequate in any way, but we are listening to them. I think in such a situation, the first thing is to listen and ask questions, and with curiosity, not questions with disgust. You can ask questions with disgust, with the demeanor of wondering how that is ever going to happen. But you can be very lovingly curious and ask questions like, oh, that's a great idea. How do you plan on going about this? I want to know so I can see how I can help. And your spouse can begin to tell you all that he or she has thought about over the years as to what can be done to achieve that goal. A lot of the great things we see in our community, in our lives today, started with a small dream, and it's been grown to the big institutions and companies that we know, even churches. My own church started in my pastor's living room, as he tells a story, and now it's on almost an international organization with locations in different places where the ministry is reaching out and touching many people's lives, and in South America and North America and other parts of the world, and so is all the big businesses that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So what am I trying to say here? Let's not let indifference prevent us from appreciating the dreams of our spouse, the goals, their desires. If your wife tells you, I want to learn how to dance salsa or K-pop or whatever, let's not laugh at it, but let's find a ways of supporting that dream and making sure that we're going to help them to make that a reality. So as we continue to talk about these things, I want you to think of ways that maybe indifference maybe is beginning to set into your relationship, or maybe in the past there was indifference, and what did you do to get through it? Have you been able to totally deal with it, ensure that there is there are no remnants of indifference in your heart? Because as I pointed out earlier, indifference, resentment, all those things happen as a result of hurt and pain that hasn't been resolved over a long period of time. So as we deal with these things, let's have in mind that it forms the foundation for us to have a much more loving and happy relationship in our marriage. So as we develop and grow in these relationships, we'll also make sure that it is bringing about joy and happiness and fulfillment in our relationship. So the next thing we're going to be looking at is that what can we do? We've talked enough about what indifference is, the signs we see, what brings about indifference, and all the other negative emotions that go along with it. But the question now is, what can we do to either get out of it or make sure that this doesn't happen. The first thing we need to do in dealing with indifference in our marriage is to talk about it. You know, if you realize something is not right, begin by talking about it. And I must say that talking about it doesn't mean that you are going to talk down on your spouse or raise your voice or become very negative in your approach to it. That will only worsen the situation. But approaching it in a more subdued and loving way. If you are going to pull your marriage out of the rut, both of you have to acknowledge that there's a problem. And, one person, Dr. Emerson will always say the mature one should start talking about it and start addressing the issues that are facing your relationship. You won't get far if you are the only one who thinks there's a problem. And it is why marriages fail. So if you're in a situation where you realize you are the only one who realizes something is wrong, what I will say is that shift gears and make sure that you're living in love. You're not letting the negativity get to your heart. Years ago, we watched a movie with our daughters. And it's I'm trying to recollect the name of the movie right now, but it's gonna come. Is the whatever the movie is where Olaf is one of my favorite characters, by the way, and it's about the two sisters in this movie who are the main characters, and one of them fell and I think was picked up by some dwarfs. And please don't quote me on this, but I'm trying to get to the point here. I might be getting some of the details of this movie wrong. But again, the point was when the dwarfs picked this little girl up, they took her and she looked like she had fainted, and they came back and said, oh, she only hit her head. It never got to her heart. And I really like that part, because it only got to her head, meaning that she did not let the pain of the fall or whatever happened to her get to her heart. And that's one thing we all have to become very good at. That when something happens, let's deal with it as best as we can with our heads. Let's remind ourselves how special we are. Let's remind ourselves of all the good things, even though we are facing some difficult challenges, even though we are facing a spouse who is indifferent. We have to make sure that it does not get to our heart. It's not easy. I'm telling you this. I'm not saying it's easy. But the point is that is how we can get through this. So if we keep this from getting into our heart, we can begin to and also continue to show love and not hide and inhibit pain and anger in our hearts. And that will be the first step to helping us to get through this difficult situation of indifference in our relationship. Again, my name is Akwesi Opong with Enjoy Life with Your Spouse, and today we're coming to you on Sunlight Radio Online, and we'll be right back. Hello, and thanks for joining us again. This is Akwesi Opong with Sunlight Radio Online and Enjoy Life with Your Spouse. And today we are talking about indifference in marriage. We have done a very good job in defining it and understanding it. And earlier on, before we went on that quick break, I was trying to recollect a movie, and that movie is Frozen. Frozen is the movie, and there's a deep lesson that I learned in there that when something happens, let it stay in your head. Don't let it get to your heart. And once it gets into your heart, then it starts affecting your emotions, and we go into that spiral, and it starts affecting everything in our lives. So I stand corrected here. The movie is Frozen. So before we went on that quick break, we established the fact that both of you in a relationship have to acknowledge something is wrong. It's usually the first step in helping you to address the issues and be able to overcome whatever rut of indifference you find your relationship in. So, as we go through this, I want you to think through the process of things that has happened in your relationship in the past, and how you think and what you think can be done to help resolve that. So one way to help you and your spouse realize that there's a problem is to remind yourselves or remind each other of the good times. You know, I can't say this enough. Reminding yourself of the good times. What are the good things that have happened in your relationship? You know, sitting back to really think through all the good times you've had in your relationship. It's always a blessing. It's always a way of helping you to be able to develop and grow, and help you not to let the momentarily downtime or negative moments of indifference really cloud your entire relationship. You know, so figuring out what happened or what brought about the hurt or resentment, it's a good way to start. You know, it's overwhelming, and whatever is overwhelming the positive feelings in your relationship. So the steps here is trying to follow, go down the path of identifying how did we get here in the first place, what brought us here, and that will help you to know how to dig yourselves out of it.